Hi, Dennis Weiss for Eagle Communications. Welcome back to the Eisenhower Presidential Library with our new series called Like Ike. I have a couple of co-stars with me today. We have Matt Thompson in the middle, we have Tim Reeves on the end, and we have a table full of the artifacts here from the library. Good morning, fellas.
Good morning.
How's everybody at the Eisenhower Library and Why Like Ike program?
Oh, we're doing great.
Doing great?
Outstanding.
Outstanding. Okay, so what's our topic today, Mr. Tim?
Well, we are continuing with Ike's Top 10, which we all know now runs to about 23 items.
Okay.
One of which was ending the Korean War 6 months after taking office. And that had become a campaign issue. In fact, the slogan for the Eisenhower forces in 1952, the sort of shorthand was KC squared, which was Korea, communism, and corruption. And of course, the Korean War, which began in June of 1950, had been fought up and down the peninsula for about 18 months and then stalemated around the 38th parallel, had become very unpopular, had really driven President Truman's numbers down. And Ike vowed in a campaign speech in October of '52 in Detroit that, if elected president, I will go to Korea, which immediately gave him a 4 or 5 point bounce in the polls just because of the confidence it inspired, in his reputation as a military leader. And so at the end of November, early December, he made good on that promise. In fact, first there was kind of a snarky telegram from President Truman saying, well, if you're still interested in going to Korea, now that the campaign's over, you can use my plane. But Ike did go, got the lay of the land, visited troops, including his own son, John.
Picture on the wall behind us, isn't there?
That's right, just behind you. There's Ike in his cold weather gear. But decided that there really wasn't any reason to continue the war in its present form, and within 6 months concluded an armistice that largely has held in the 60-plus years since then. And so he obviously did see that as quite an accomplishment.
Are there any other long-lasting armistice? I can't think of one.
Must hold the record.
Certainly not in the modern era, anyway.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, the Cold War and the Korean War, there are people watching that are Korean veterans or were married to a Korean veteran, or their brother, uncle. That's still pretty relevant.
Still have American troops in Korea?
Yeah. We've lost most of our World War II vets. We still have a few in the area, but there's a number of Korean veterans in our watching profile here today, so this will be of interest to them.
Great. And I know we have a number of artifacts from Korea that Matt can address.
Oh, goodness. We have a table full.
Yes, I'd be glad to. And I might as well point out that despite some of my contrary opinions in the previous episode, I actually would definitely concur that this is one of Eisenhower's hallmark achievements, quickly negotiating an armistice that, as Tim pointed out, has largely held. Minor provocations over the ensuing decades, but ending a major conflict in the manner he did is certainly laudatory, and I thank him for that.
I would agree.
We have a few items, some of which actually came from the Korean Peninsula during the war. In front of me is a C-96 broom handle Mauser, which was originally a German handgun, and some way or another it ended up in Korea, and this was captured from a North Korean unit, and a South Korean commander later presented this to Eisenhower as a token of friendship, and it's been in the museum ever since.
It's interesting, you pointed this out before we started filming. That's an actual German pistol.
That's correct.
Because the Chinese did make copies of them, but this one originated in Germany.
This particular one has German factory markings on it, so if only it could talk, it would be interesting to find out how it got from point A to point B, but we'll never know. We have a Zippo lighter that was given to Eisenhower by members of the 2nd Infantry Division when he toured Korea and talked with men from their unit. It simply says, to President Eisenhower from the 2nd Infantry Division, Korea, 1952. And then we have a few diplomatic gifts that came from the South Korean president, Syngman Rhee. We have a beautiful tusk that was taken off of an elephant and then transformed into a sculpture of elephants. These kind of gifts were fairly common.
That was all done at an elephant dental clinic.
Of course. And this set of utensils in the presentation box also came from South Korea, albeit later during his presidency, so we can revisit that in a few moments.
This is a little burner, is it not?
I believe so.
To probably make tea,
And it
I'm
includes,
guessing?
a spoon and a set of chopsticks. It's very lovely.
Yeah. It really is. Amazing artifacts. You know, people are visual creatures, and I think such of the benefit of the library is that you can give meaning to thoughts by showing people things. It becomes real when they see this instead of just a discussion they hear on TV or read in a book, but they can come here and see the history on the table in front of them, and it really adds meaning to the event, I think. What else have you got, Matt?
That's the conclusion of our things from the
Korea.
Korean War.
Okay, all right.
We have a number of other items that came from, well, we talked about the beginning of Eisenhower's presidency. At the end of his tenure, he embarked on a goodwill tour to conduct personal diplomacy with his counterparts.
Which he was very good at.
Yes, he was, and this, was something that he thought was a good use of his time, talking about the third world, meaning countries that weren't aligned just with the United States or just with the Soviet Union. He wanted to go put in an appearance and keep friendships going. So, of course, traditionally, whenever you do that, the heads of state will exchange gifts with each other. So we have a number of things that came from his stops on the something like 22,000 miles that he covered during his journey.
3 weeks.
In front of Tim over here, we have a collection of leather goods that came from Greece, a belt, a pair of sandals that look as though they've never been worn, and a nice handbag. Has kind of a souvenir shop look to it, but this is what he got when he stopped there. He also visited Asia. We have a statue, also made of ivory, from India, and a small piece of mosaic artwork from Pakistan, which was a country that Eisenhower had a lot of close relations with during that time. He also went to Latin America, South America. We have a very nice medallion from the Chilean government, and over here a set of honorary keys to the city from when he visited Turkey, one of which is from Ankara. So he had a lot of luggage to come back with him after this journey. I don't know if Tim has anything more to share about the nuances of that trip.
Oh, I think as we discussed in the previous episode that, Eisenhower's entire, tenure as presidency took place in that Cold War context. So this sort of goodwill journey, again, really can't be removed from that context. But it was very popular around the world trip that he took.
Yeah.
A lot of press coverage.
It's part and parcel of what you folks do every day, but it pays us to re-inform people as they watch these programs that this was a time in our American history that change had occurred. If you look at before World War II, we really weren't prepared to go to war. We weren't looking at war. You can tell that because we weren't prepared to do it. To now, after World War II, and as Mr. Eisenhower took office, we were one of two leaders of the world political climate, and the responsibility of that, the change from a relatively isolated, happy little continent over here in North America to being engaged everywhere in the world at such a high level, that's a huge change to our geopolitical structure.
And another one of Ike's top 10, 23 accomplishments was, as he said, the maintenance of an adequate military force after the cessation of a war. And that was part of his efforts to reorganize the military, really to make it more affordable. Because he thought, if you don't have a strong economy, then your security is going to be weakened. And so that was, it's all part of that big picture in that context.
One of the things that we had on our list for the last program that we never really got into very far was the economics of Eisenhower's administration. And you just highlighted one of the areas that he felt so strongly about, that we needed. Our first line of defense was a strong economy. And then from there, a judicial management of the industrial military complex.
He was very proud of having 3 balanced budgets, lowering inflation and also reducing taxes. He didn't reduce the tax rates, but he increased deductions for individuals and families. And again, he included all 3 of those items on his list.
The stuff we have in front of us, Matt, it's all from international sources. When Eisenhower traveled the world, they gave him these things as token, and every president has that privilege, I guess. But we're here to talk about Eisenhower. I don't know that of a current, doesn't come to my mind anyway, a president that can really claim a point in history like Eisenhower's goodwill journey around the world. That's a moment in time which the world hasn't seen since. The Second World War was the last one. So it was a huge thing, and the repository of those artifacts and that information about that trip and why he went and what he gained for our country are here.
Yeah, and I think it was also, just kind of a tribute to him here, maybe at the end of his life of public service, to go on kind of a victory lap of sorts.
Sure. Well, that's okay too. That's
He deserved
okay
it.
too. He certainly did. Watched the program last night, and I thought about President Eisenhower, and at the time General Eisenhower, the choices that were made by ordinary people who had a different calling than you or I were so formative to the rest of history since then. And Ike stepped up and made those choices. He made them based on principle of who he was. What was his comment? The proudest thing I can say is, I'm from Abilene. His life informed his choices, and what a great example to all of us. You are who you are by what you have accomplished in life and what you've decided to be. And Eisenhower decided to be a diplomat. He decided to be a person who would make decisions based on compassion.
And again, you can see the consequences of those decisions displayed, exhibited here in the museum or in his papers in the library.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. I look at these artifacts in front of us, Matt, and wide from handmade leather shoes over there to a probably gold key to the city in the Far East, Near East. And I think people give their best to somebody when they come, a dignitary that comes. It's a time to exchange more than just things. It's really an expression of how they feel. Eisenhower had such great stature in the world. These things, when people come see them here and talk to you as you walk through the exhibits, they're going to have a chance to see who Eisenhower was to Korea, who Eisenhower was to the Greek islands. I think that's an unparalleled opportunity.
That actually informs an interesting observation that I've noticed just from working here, and we've had researchers who come in and want to look at diplomatic gifts, and they'll point it out too that there's often a correlation between the type of diplomatic relationship that we may have had with a country and the quantity and quality of the gifts that the president receives. We have probably at least 20 other items from Greece. Forgive me from saying so, much nicer than the ones you see here, vases and urns and things from thousands of years ago. And that really started with the Truman administration, because Greece was getting that sweet Marshall Plan money, and suddenly they became a lot more generous with their tokens of gratitude. But it is very interesting. It's just a illustration of cultural exchange. Generally the diplomatic gifts are meant to be unique to the country and the culture and the history from where they're coming from. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out Mr. Khrushchev behind you.
Yes,
It might surprise people to know that we have an extensive collection of
shoes?
Diplomatic gifts. Very good. From the Soviet Union, that despite the ongoing tensions that characterized the Eisenhower administration during the Cold War, he had a very good personal working relationship with Nikita Khrushchev, and we have a number of really marvelous things that he gave to him during their meetings and summits. So there was definitely a kind of intimate diplomacy that was happening within the context of an arms race and threats and bombastic international gestures.
Yeah, I've said this before, I'm sure, on one of the programs about Eisenhower, but it's truly remarkable the gift he had to get along with difficult people. That's a gift. That's something that cannot be learned. It's just a gift. You can choose to try, but you're not going to be good at it unless you have the gift of it. And Eisenhower certainly had it. And he accepted the responsibility of getting along with Nikita Khrushchev and his allies.
Or General Montgomery.
And General Montgomery, right, and Patton, and the French. So all of that just was reflecting the extraordinary leader that Eisenhower was. And we're blessed to say that Abilene is his home.
Now, Ike did, maybe we should mention here in closing, had what he considered two failures. And number one was some sort of peaceful settlement between the East and the West. And the second was to, in his mind, kind of rebuild the Republican Party and to have his successor elected, who narrowly lost to John F. Kennedy. But he saw those as his two failures as president.
Well, that's interesting. You don't think about failure and Eisenhower very much in the same sentence, but we all have them, right, as people?
Or to admit it so willingly.
Right. Okay. We should do a program about that sometime.
Presidential failures.
Yeah,
Be a
presidential
long
failures.
series.
It wouldn't take long to do Eisenhower's, but
No.
it would be very interesting, I think, to people to see, again, because I've seen some of the photos that you've had in the museum anyway, of that presidential election you're talking about. So that's a period of history which probably many people haven't thought about that were very formative to the next 30 years after Eisenhower as well. Okay, any last minute things about the stuff that we have out here, the special artifacts, Matt, before we sign off?
I can't think of a thing unless you have
You can't
any
think of a
questions.
thing?
There's plenty more to
Yeah, there's
see.
lots more where this came from, so
Okay.
please come and visit. It will be well worth your time and effort.
I will just point out that my area of expertise, you understand, that old broom-handled Mauser up there, the bluing that was done originally in Germany on that weapon, probably the best bluing that's ever done ever in the history of the world, deep and thick, and it's almost all gone, and it didn't get worn off here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library with the white gloves. So that is a living piece of history that probably went through World War II in Germany, and then moved as a surplus arm out into another conflict. And we talked about the Cold War, we talked about Russia, the military arms that moved all over the world at that time. And Eisenhower, who knew intimately of all of those things, that was his military world, had the greatest fear of the military-industrial complex and its selfish desire to repeat itself. And I think, again, that Eisenhower knew the horrors of war. I always think of what he said about the Holocaust and how he said, I'm going there because I want to be able to say that I saw it with my eyes. And that informed the man. I think that drove compassion about the way he governed as a president and frankly, how he probably lived the rest of his life and hopes and dreams. So there we are. A great display here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library that we have on the table in front of us, and that's just a drop in the bucket to what you can see here if you come and spend a little time at the library. And Mr. Reeves on the end, he's our expert on the documents and what is the record of what was said and done. Such a tremendous thing here. So why like Ike? Because he was a great guy, a great military leader, a great president, and a great citizen of Abilene, Kansas, America. We're glad you are too, and we look forward to seeing you maybe walking the halls at the Eisenhower Presidential Library. For Tim Reeves, Matt Thompson, I'm Dennis Weiss for Eagle Communications. You have a great day.